The coppery taste of blood filled Clara Thompson's mouth as she trudged through the barren wilderness outside Aurora, Colorado, in the spring of 1875. Each step felt like her last, her swollen belly a painful reminder of the life growing inside her and the reason she'd been cast out from the only home she'd ever known. One more mile, she whispered to herself, though she had no destination. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on her fair skin, already reddening despite the bonnet that hung limply from her neck. Clara had been walking since dawn, banished from Aurora with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bundle of possessions. The memory of her father's face, contorted with rage upon discovering her condition, haunted her with each step. "No daughter of mine will bring such shame to our family," he'd spat, his voice carrying through their modest home on Aurora's east side. Her mother had simply turned away, unwilling or unable to defend her only daughter. Now Clara stumbled, falling to her knees on the hard-packed earth. 6 months with child, unmarried, and abandoned her situation couldn't possibly be worse. The man responsible, the bank manager's son who had promised her the world, had denied everything when confronted and promptly left town on urgent business. "Please," she begged, though no one was there to hear. "Please help us." Her hand cradled her belly protectively as tears carved clean paths down her dust-covered face. As the sun began its descent behind the distant mountains, Clara's strength finally gave out. She collapsed beneath the sparse shade of a scrub oak, her breathing shallow. The small bundle she'd managed to take containing a water canteen now empty, a faded photograph of her mother, and a small knife lay beside her. She closed her eyes, wondering if she would ever open them again. Miss, can you hear me?" The voice seemed to come from far away, piercing through the fog of Clara's consciousness. Rough hands, gentler than she expected, turned her onto her back. She struggled to open her eyes, the setting sun silhouetting the figure above her. "She's alive, just barely," the man called out, presumably to a companion. "And she's with child." Clara managed to focus her vision. A weathered face framed by dark hair looked down at her with concern. His blue eyes were kind but wary, his sun-bronzed skin speaking of years spent outdoors. "Water," she croaked, her throat painfully dry. Without hesitation, the man brought a canteen to her lips, supporting her head as she drank. The cool liquid was like heaven itself. "Easy now," he cautioned. "Too much at once will make you sick." When Clara had taken enough to ease her immediate thirst, the man helped her to sit up slowly. Now she could see him more clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a dusty Stetson that he'd removed upon finding her. "Name's Hank Lawson," he said, his voice deep and steady. "My ranch is about 3 miles east of here. Can you tell me your name, Miss Clara Thompson?" she managed, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen. Hank nodded, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts about her condition. "Miss Thompson, you're in no state to be out here alone. Night's coming, and with it the coyotes and worse. I've got my wagon just over the rise. If you'll allow it, I'd like to take you to my ranch where you can rest and recover." Clara hesitated, years of warnings about strangers, especially men, flashing through her mind. But what choice did she have? Death awaited her here, that was certain. "Thank you," she whispered. With surprising gentleness, Hank lifted her into his arms, gathering her small bundle as well. As he carried her toward his wagon, Clara felt her consciousness slipping again, the exhaustion of her ordeal finally claiming her completely. When she next awoke, Clara found herself in a simple but clean bedroom. Sunlight streamed through calico curtains, casting a warm glow across a handmade quilt covering her. For a moment, she wondered if she'd dreamed the entire ordeal, but the unfamiliar surroundings and the persistent ache in her body told her otherwise. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of an older woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a tight bun. Her weathered face broke into a smile when she saw Clara was awake. "There you are, child. We were starting to worry," she said, approaching the bed with a tray of food. "I'm Martha Wilson, the housekeeper here at Lawson Ranch. You've been sleeping for nearly a full day." Clara struggled to sit up, alarmed. "A day? Don't you fret now," Martha interrupted, setting the tray on the bedside table and helping Clara adjust her position. "The doctor came by yesterday evening, said you and the baby are doing just fine, but you need rest and proper nourishment." Clara's hands went to her belly, relief flooding through her. "The baby is all right," Martha nodded. "Strong heartbeat," the doctor said. "Now eat something. It's just broth and bread for now until we're sure your stomach can handle more." As Clara sipped the warm chicken broth, Martha busied herself tidying the already neat room. "Mr. Lawson will want to know you're awake. He's been checking in every few hours, though he tries not to show his concern." "He saved my life," Clara said quietly. "I don't know how I can ever repay such kindness." Martha's expression softened. "That's just the kind of man he is. Been running this ranch alone since his pa died 3 years ago. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's got a good heart." She paused, her eyes falling to Clara's belly. "He didn't ask any questions about your situation, and neither will I. That's your business to share or keep." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes. After months of judgment and scorn, such respect for her privacy felt like an unimaginable luxury. "Thank you," she whispered. Martha patted her hand. "Rest now. I'll let Mr. Lawson know you're on the mend." Over the next few days, Clara gradually regained her strength. Martha provided her with clean clothes that had belonged to Hank's late mother's simple, but well-made dresses that accommodated her growing belly with some adjustments. Clara spent most of her time in the bedroom or sitting in a rocking chair by the window, watching the daily activities of the ranch. Hank Lawson's property wasn't the largest in the territory, but it was well-maintained, with a modest herd of cattle, several horses, a few dairy cows, and chickens. From her window, Clara often observed Hank working with his small crew of 3 ranch hands directing cattle movements, repairing fences, or training horses in the corral. It was nearly a week before Clara felt strong enough to join the household for dinner. Martha had announced that morning that, "It's time you joined the land of the living properly, Miss Thompson," and had helped her dress in a blue calico dress, arranging her light brown hair in a simple but neat style. When Clara entered the dining room, Hank rose immediately from his chair at the head of the table. He looked different indoors, cleaner, certainly his dark hair still damp from washing, but also somehow less comfortable, as if the confines of the house made him restless. "Miss Thompson," he said with a nod. "It's good to see you up and about. Please call me Clara," she replied. "And thank you again for your kindness, Mr. Lawson." "Hank," he corrected, pulling out a chair for her. "We don't stand on ceremony here." As Martha served a hearty meal of roast beef, potatoes, and spring vegetables, Clara noticed Hank stealing glances at her. Not at her belly, as so many had done in town with disgust or pity, but at her face, as if trying to read something there. "How are you feeling?" he asked finally, breaking the somewhat awkward silence. "Much better," Clara answered. "Thanks to your hospitality and Martha's excellent care." Hank nodded, seemingly satisfied. "The doctor will be back to check on you next week. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay as long as you need." "That's very generous, but I couldn't impose. It's no imposition," he interrupted firmly. "Winter's over, but spring can be just as dangerous out here for someone alone." His eyes briefly dropped to her belly before returning to her face. "Where were you headed when I found you?" Clara lowered her gaze to her plate. "Nowhere in particular. I had to leave Aurora." Hank didn't press for details, which Clara appreciated. Instead, he changed the subject, telling her about the ranch and his plans for expanding the cattle operation that summer. His voice grew more animated when discussing his work, revealing a passion that seemed at odds with his otherwise reserved demeanor. After dinner, Hank excused himself to check on a mare that was close to foaling, leaving Clara with Martha in the kitchen. "He talks more when you're around," Martha observed as she handed Clara a dish towel. "Usually, I'm lucky to get 10 words out of him at mealtime." Clara felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure he's just being polite to a guest." Martha made a noncommittal sound, a knowing smile playing at her lips. That night, lying in bed, Clara allowed herself to consider her future for the first time since being cast out. The baby would arrive in about 3 months. She had no home, no money, and no prospects. Hank's generosity couldn't last forever. He'd already done far more than could be expected of a stranger, She placed her hands on her rounded belly, feeling the slight movements of the child within. "We'll find a way," she whispered. "Somehow." As the days passed, Clara regained more of her strength and began to feel restless confined to the house. One morning, after Hank had ridden out with his men to check on the far pastures, she ventured outside for the first time since arriving at the ranch. The April air was crisp but not unpleasant, carrying the scent of wildflowers and sun-warmed earth. Clara walked slowly toward the kitchen garden where Martha was planting seedlings. "Mind if I help?" Clara asked. Martha looked up, squinting against the sun. "Should you be up and about so much?" "The doctor said moderate activity would be good for me," Clara replied, "and I'm going stir-crazy indoors." Martha chuckled. "Well then, you can plant these pea seeds along that trellis, just don't overdo it." For the next hour, Clara worked alongside the older woman, finding unexpected satisfaction in the simple task of preparing the soil and planting seeds. By the time they finished, her back ached and her hands were dirty, but she felt more alive than she had in months. "You've got a knack for it," Martha observed as they headed back to the house. "Most city girls wouldn't know one end of a hoe from the other," Clara smiled. "My mother kept a garden behind our house. It was small, but she grew the best tomatoes in town." The memory brought a pang of homesickness, despite everything that had happened. "You miss them, don't you?" Martha asked gently. "Your family," Clara nodded, tears threatening. "I miss who they were before they found out about the baby. My father was stern but fair. My mother was quiet but loving. Then everything changed." Martha wrapped a comforting arm around Clara's shoulders. "Families are complicated, child. Sometimes people disappoint us when we need them most." As they approached the house, the sound of hoofbeats announced Hank's return. He rode into the yard on his chestnut gelding, dismounting with easy grace. When he spotted Clara outside, his eyebrows rose in surprise. "Should you be out here?" he called, handing his reins to one of the ranch hands. Clara bristled slightly at his concern. "I'm pregnant, not invalid," she replied, then immediately regretted her sharp tone. "I'm sorry, I just needed some fresh air and activity." To her surprise, a smile tugged at the corner of Hank's mouth. "Fair enough. Just don't let Martha work you too hard. She'd have everyone pulling double duty if she could." "I heard that," Martha called over her shoulder as she entered the house, leaving Clara and Hank alone in the yard. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when Hank cleared his throat. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with you. If you're feeling up to it, would you join me on the porch after supper?" Clara's heart inexplicably quickened. Of course. That evening, after a meal of chicken and dumplings, Clara found Hank waiting on the wide front porch. He'd set out 2 rocking chairs, and a lantern cast a warm glow against the gathering dusk. "Beautiful evening," Clara commented as she carefully lowered herself into one of the chairs. Hank nodded, his profile strong against the darkening sky. "Spring's my favorite time of year on the ranch. Everything coming back to life after the long winter." They rocked in companionable silence for a few minutes, listening to the night sounds, crickets beginning their evening chorus, an owl hooting from a distant tree. "I wanted to talk to you about your plans," Hank finally said, his voice careful. "I meant what I said about staying as long as you need, but I also understand you might want to make arrangements for after." Clara's hands rested on her belly. "To be honest, I haven't thought that far ahead. When my father cast me out, all I could think about was surviving each day." Hank turned to look at her directly. "The father of your child, is he?" "Gone," Clara said flatly. "He made promises he never intended to keep, and when faced with the consequences, he ran." Anger flashed briefly across Hank's features. "Some men don't deserve the title." "No," Clara agreed softly. "They don't." Hank shifted in his chair. "I've been thinking, the ranch needs help with more than just the cattle and horses. The house is too big for just Martha and me, and the accounts need organizing. I was wondering if you might consider staying on working here, I mean. There'd be a proper wage, and you and the baby would have a place to live." Clara stared at him, stunned by the offer. "You would do that? For a woman you barely know, a woman in my situation?" Hank's gaze was steady. "I judge people by their character, not by gossip or circumstances. You've shown strength and dignity in a situation that would break many. Besides," he added with a slight smile, Martha likes you, and she doesn't like many people." A laugh bubbled up unexpectedly from Clara's throat. "She is rather particular, so," Hank prompted. "Would you consider it?" Clara looked out at the ranch, silvered now in the rising moonlight. She thought of the alternative, trying to find work in another town, a single mother with no references or family support. "I would be honored," she said finally, "and grateful beyond words." Hank nodded, seeming pleased but embarrassed by her gratitude. "Good, that's settled then." He stood, slightly awkward now that their business was concluded. "Well, I should see to the horses before turning in. Good night, Clara." "Good night, Hank," she replied, watching as he strode across the yard toward the barn, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness. Clara remained on the porch a while longer, rocking gently and contemplating this unexpected turn in her fortune. For the first time since discovering she was with child, she felt something like hope stirring in her heart. Over the next few weeks, Clara settled into life at Lawson Ranch. True to his word, Hank set her up with the ranch accounts ledgers that had been somewhat neglected since his father's passing. Clara discovered she had a talent for numbers and organization, bringing order to the chaotic record-keeping system. When not working on the accounts, Clara helped Martha with household tasks and expanded the kitchen garden. Her growing belly made some activities challenging, but she found ways to contribute, determined not to be a burden. Hank, for his part, maintained a respectful distance, though Clara often caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice. Their conversations gradually grew longer and more personal, typically in the evenings on the porch, which had become their unofficial meeting place. It was during one such evening in late May, with Clara now 7 months along, that they had their first real disagreement. "I can manage the trip," Clara insisted, her chin lifted stubbornly. "Aurora is barely 10 miles away." Hank's jaw tightened. "It's not the distance I'm concerned about. It's the reception you might get. You said yourself your family cast you out." "I need to at least try to make peace with them before the baby comes," Clara explained. "And I need supplies that Martha says can only be found in town." "I could go for you," Hank offered, "or send one of the hands." Clara shook her head. "This is something I need to do myself. Please understand." Hank ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "At least let me drive you in the wagon. The roads are rough this time of year." Recognizing this as the compromise it was, Clara nodded. "Thank you." 2 days later, they set out for Aurora shortly after dawn. Clara wore her best dress, one of Martha's clever alterations of Mrs. Lawson's clothing, and had spent extra time arranging her hair. She was nervous but determined. The journey passed mostly in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the outskirts of town, Clara's anxiety mounted. "You don't have to do this," Hank said quietly. "We can turn around right now." Clara took a deep breath. "No, I need to try." Aurora in 1875 was a growing town, benefiting from its position near Denver and the mining operations in the mountains. The main street bustled with activity shoppers, businessmen, and the occasional cowboy in town for supplies. As Hank helped Clara down from the wagon in front of the general store, she felt eyes upon her. A woman passing by nudged her companion, whispering something that made them both look back at Clara. "Ignore them," Hank said, his voice low but fierce. "You hold your head high." Clara nodded, grateful for his support. "I'll meet you back here in 2 hours. I'd like to visit my parents alone." Hank frowned but agreed. 2 hours. If you're not back, I'm coming to find you." After purchasing the supplies Martha had requested, Clara made her way to the modest house on Oak Street where she had grown up. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she pressed on, finally arriving at the familiar white picket fence that surrounded her childhood home. Nothing had changed in the months she'd been gone. The same curtains hung in the windows, the same rocking chair sat on the porch. Clara opened the gate and walked up the short path to the front door, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it could be heard from the street. Before she could knock, the door opened, revealing her mother, Emma Thompson, looking thin and tired, her once bright eyes now shadowed. "Clara," she gasped, one hand flying to her throat. Her gaze immediately went to Clara's prominently rounded abdomen. "Hello, Mother," Clara said softly. "May I come in?" Emma glanced nervously over her shoulder before stepping onto the porch and closing the door behind her. "Your father isn't home," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wouldn't be wise." The rejection, though expected, still stung. "I see. I just wanted to tell you that I'm well. The baby and I both are." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I prayed for you every night. I wanted to search for you, but your father." "I understand," Clara said, though part of her couldn't understand how a mother would abandon her child to please her husband. "Where have you been staying?" Emma asked, her gaze darting up and down the street as if afraid of being seen with her disgraced daughter. "A kind rancher found me when I collapsed outside town. He and his housekeeper have taken me in. I'm working there now, keeping the accounts." Relief crossed Emma's features. "Thank the Lord. When your father sent you away, I feared the worst." "You mean when you both sent me away," Clara corrected gently. "You didn't stop him, Mother." Emma flinched as if slapped. "I couldn't defy him, Clara. You know what he's like." Before Clara could respond, a wagon turned onto their street, her father's wagon, with the familiar figure of George Thompson at the reins. "You need to go," Emma said urgently. "He can't find you here. Please, Clara." Clara felt a wave of sadness wash over her. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that time might have softened her father's heart. "Will you at least write to me? I'm at Lawson Ranch, east of town." Emma hesitated, then nodded quickly. "When I can. Now go quickly." Clara hurried down the path and out the gate, turning the corner just as her father's wagon reached their home. She didn't look back, tears blurring her vision as she made her way through the familiar streets toward the general store. Lost in her thoughts, Clara didn't notice the man approaching until he stepped directly into her path. "Well, look who's back in town," drawled a voice that made her blood run cold. Richard Blackwell, the banker's son and father of her unborn child, stood before her, impeccably dressed as always, his handsome face twisted in a smirk. "Richard," Clara acknowledged, trying to step around him. He blocked her path. "I see my little problem has gotten considerably bigger," he said, eyeing her belly with distaste. Clara lifted her chin. "Your problem is my blessing now. Excuse me." Richard grabbed her arm as she tried to pass. "Not so fast. I've been hearing rumors about you shacking up with that rancher, Lawson. Moving on rather quickly, aren't you?" "Let go of me," Clara demanded, trying to pull away. "My arrangement with Mr. Lawson is respectable and none of your concern." Richard's grip tightened. "Is that what you call it?" "The whole town knows what kind of woman you are now, Clara. No ring, no husband, just a bastard in your belly." "I believe the lady asked you to let her go." Hank's voice, cold and dangerous, came from behind Richard. Clara had never been so relieved to see anyone in her life. Richard turned, not releasing Clara's arm. "This isn't your business, Lawson. Miss Thompson works for me. That makes it my business," Hank replied evenly. "Now let her go." Something in Hank's tone must have penetrated Richard's arrogance, because he released Clara's arm, though his expression remained smug. "So it's Miss Thompson, is it? At least you're not pretending she's anything but what she is." Faster than Clara could follow, Hank's fist connected with Richard's jaw, sending the younger man staggering backward. "What she is," Hank said, his voice still dangerously calm, "is a lady deserving of respect, something you clearly know nothing about." Richard touched his jaw, eyes wide with shock and fury. "You'll regret that, Lawson. Your father should have taught you better manners," Hank interrupted. "Now get out of our way." Taking Clara's elbow gently, Hank guided her past the seething Richard and toward the general store where their wagon waited. Once they were out of earshot, he stopped, examining her with concern. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" Clara shook her head, though her arm throbbed where Richard had gripped it. "I'm fine. Thank you for intervening." Hank's expression darkened. "Was that him? The father?" Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "I should have hit him harder," Hank muttered, helping her into the wagon. "Did you see your parents?" "Only my mother," Clara replied, fighting back tears. "My father was returning home, and she sent me away before he could see me." Hank's jaw tightened as he climbed up beside her and took the reins. "I'm sorry, Clara. You deserved better than that. Better than what I got from Richard or my parents," she asked bitterly. "Both," Hank replied simply, turning the wagon toward home. They rode in silence for several miles, Clara lost in thoughts of what might have been. Hank respecting her need for quiet reflection. Finally, as they crested a hill that offered a view of Lawson Ranch in the distance, Clara spoke. "Thank you for bringing me today." "It wasn't the outcome I'd hoped for, but at least now I know." Hank glanced at her. "Know what?" "That I can't go back," she said softly. "That chapter of my life is closed. I need to focus on the future now for myself and my child." Hank nodded, a look of approval crossing his features. "For what it's worth, I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met." The compliment warmed Clara despite her melancholy mood. "Even braver than Jeremiah fighting off that mountain lion last month," she teased, referring to one of the ranch hands' oft-repeated tales. Hank chuckled. "Considerably braver, and with far less exaggeration involved." As they approached the ranch, Clara felt a surprising sense of homecoming. In just a few weeks, this place had become more of a home to her than the house she'd grown up in. The thought was both comforting and unsettling. Martha was waiting on the porch when they arrived, clearly concerned about how the trip to town had gone. One look at Clara's face told her all she needed to know. "Come inside, child," she said, helping Clara down from the wagon. "I've got fresh lemonade cooling in the spring house, and you look like you could use something sweet." Clara smiled gratefully at the older woman. "That sounds wonderful." As Martha led her toward the house, Clara glanced back to see Hank unloading their purchases, his strong profile outlined against the afternoon sun. Something stirred in her heart, then a feeling she had promised herself she would never allow again after Richard's betrayal. "He's a good man," Martha said quietly, following Clara's gaze, "different from most." "Yes," Clara agreed, turning away before Hank could catch her watching him. "He is." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind her mother's fearful rejection, Richard's cruelty, and Hank's unexpected defense of her honor. Outside her window, a summer thunderstorm rolled across the plains, lightning occasionally illuminating her room in brief, brilliant flashes. A particularly loud crash of thunder startled her, and Clara felt a strange tightening across her abdomen. She sat up, alarmed, placing a hand on her belly. When it happened again several minutes later, stronger this time, Clara knew something was wrong. "Too early," she whispered, panic rising. The baby wasn't due for another 2 months. Clara managed to light the lamp beside her bed and was reaching for her robe when another pain gripped her, this one sharp enough to make her gasp. When it passed, she noticed something else. Her nightgown was damp. "No, please," she begged. Though whether to God or the baby, she wasn't sure. Gathering her courage, Clara made her way to the door of her room and into the hallway. Martha's room was at the far end, but to reach it, she would need to pass Hank's door. As she hesitated, another contraction seized her, stronger than before, forcing her to lean against the wall for support. A small cry escaped her lips before she could stifle it. Almost immediately, Hank's door opened, and he emerged in his nightshirt and trousers, hair tousled from sleep. "Clara," he asked, quickly taking in her distress. "What's wrong?" "The baby," she managed. "It's coming, but it's too soon." Without hesitation, Hank lifted her into his arms and carried her back to her room, laying her gently on the bed. "I'll get Martha and send for the doctor." "There's no time," Clara gasped as another contraction seized her. "The storm, the doctor won't be able to make it from town." Hank's expression shifted from concern to determination. "Martha delivered most of the children in the county before the new doctor arrived. She'll know what to do." He disappeared, returning moments later with a sleepy but rapidly alerting Martha. "Oh, child," the older woman said, quickly assessing the situation. "How far apart are the pains?" "Just a few minutes," Clara replied, fear evident in her voice. "It's too early, Martha." "Babies come when they come," Martha said with forced calm. "Hank, I need hot water, clean towels, and the sewing kit from the parlor. Then you'll need to wait outside." Hank nodded, clearly relieved to have specific tasks. As he hurried to fetch the requested items, Martha helped Clara out of her sodden nightgown and into a clean one, then arranged the bedding to prepare for the birth. "I'm scared," Clara admitted, gripping Martha's weathered hand as another contraction built. Martha squeezed back reassuringly. "You're stronger than you know, Clara Thompson, and you're not alone anymore." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and fear for Clara. The contractions came faster and stronger while the storm raged outside, as if nature itself were participating in the drama unfolding within the ranch house. Martha proved a capable midwife, her calm demeanor and practical knowledge a blessing as she guided Clara through the difficult labor. Hank remained just outside the door, occasionally called upon to bring fresh water or towels, his deep voice offering encouragement through the wood. Just before dawn, as the storm finally began to abate, Clara's daughter entered the world tiny, red-faced, and with a surprisingly robust cry for one so small. "She's beautiful," Martha declared, quickly cleaning and swaddling the infant before placing her in Clara's exhausted arms. "Small, yes, but strong. Look at those lungs." Clara gazed down at her daughter through tears of relief and wonder. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your mama." A soft knock at the door preceded Hank's hesitant query, "Is everything all right?" Martha opened the door, revealing Hank's anxious face. "Everything is fine. Come meet the newest resident of Lawson Ranch." Hank entered cautiously, his eyes widening at the sight of Clara holding the tiny bundle. "A girl," Clara nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. Hank approached the bed slowly, as if afraid of intruding on a sacred moment. When he saw the baby's face, a smile spread across his features, the first full, unguarded smile Clara had ever seen from him. "She's perfect," he said softly. "What will you call her?" Clara looked down at her daughter, considering. "Emma," she decided, thinking of her mother despite everything. "Emma Hope Thompson." "A fine name," Martha approved, discreetly wiping tears from her eyes. "Now, both mother and daughter need rest. Hank, you can admire the baby more in the morning." Hank nodded, but before leaving, he reached out tentatively and touched Clara's hand where it cradled the baby. "You did good, Clara," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Real good." In the days that followed, Clara recovered from the difficult birth while little Emma thrived despite her early arrival. Martha moved a cradle into Clara's room, one that had been Hank's own as a baby, retrieved from the attic and carefully cleaned and prepared. Hank himself seemed transformed by the baby's presence. The reserved rancher, who had once seemed uncomfortable in his own home, now found reasons to stop by the house throughout the day, ostensibly to check on ranch business, but inevitably ending up in Clara's room, watching in fascination as Emma slept, fed, or simply gazed around with her slate blue eyes. "She has your chin," he observed one evening as Clara rocked Emma by the window. "And your spirit, I'd wager," Clara smiled. "Poor child, if that's true. Stubbornness isn't always an asset. Depends on how you use it," Hank replied, leaning against the doorframe. "Stubbornness kept you alive when a weaker person might have given up. It might serve her well, too." The comment touched Clara deeply. No one had ever seen her determination as a positive quality before. Her father had always criticized her willful nature, and even Richard had complained about her obstinance when she refused his advances before finally succumbing to his charm. As June turned to July, Clara gradually resumed her duties around the ranch, though now with Emma either in her arms or nearby in a basket. The ranch hands, initially awkward around the baby, soon became protective uncles of sorts, bringing small treasures, a particularly smooth stone, a colorful feather to the little miss. One warm evening, while Martha was visiting her sister in a neighboring town, Clara sat on the porch with Emma sleeping against her shoulder. Hank joined her, bringing 2 glasses of lemonade. "The Williamsons' offer came in for the south pasture," he said, handing her a glass. "It's fair." "Better than I expected, actually." Clara nodded. She had helped Hank prepare for the land sale, organizing the property documents and calculating a reasonable asking price. "That's wonderful news. The extra capital will help with the barn expansion." Hank took a seat in the rocker beside her, his long legs stretched out before him. "I've been thinking about that expansion. If business continues to improve, I might be able to hire another hand or 2 by fall." "The accounts certainly support it," Clara agreed. "The beef prices are holding steady, and the horse training business is growing." They fell into companionable silence, watching as the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Emma stirred slightly, making the small sighing noises that always melted Clara's heart. She's getting bigger every day, Hank observed softly. Clara smiled. She is. Almost 8 pounds now, the doctor said. He couldn't believe how well she's doing for being born early. Strong like her mother, Hank said, his eyes meeting Clara's with an intensity that made her breath catch. Before Clara could respond, the sound of an approaching wagon drew their attention. Squinting against the setting sun, Hank stood. "Were you expecting someone?" Clara asked, adjusting Emma in her arms. Hank shook his head, his posture tense. "No." As the wagon drew closer, Clara recognized the driver and felt her blood run cold. "It's my father." Hank's expression hardened. "Stay here," he instructed. Stepping off the porch to meet the approaching wagon, George Thompson pulled his horses to a stop in front of the house. He was a tall man with graying brown hair and a stern countenance that had struck fear into Clara throughout her childhood. Now, seeing him through adult eyes, she recognized the weakness in his rigid demeanor, the need to control that stemmed from insecurity rather than strength. "Mr. Thompson," Hank greeted him, his voice neutral but guarded. "What brings you to Lawson Ranch?" George Thompson climbed down from his wagon, ignoring Hank's question as his gaze fixed on Clara and the baby. "So it's true," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "You've had your bastard." Clara felt a surge of protective fury. "Her name is Emma," she said clearly, rising from her chair, "and she is my daughter, not a bastard. The whole town is talking," George continued as if she hadn't spoken, "saying you've taken up with this rancher now. One man's leaving's passed to another." Hank stepped between George and the porch. "You need to leave, Mr. Thompson." "Now," George tried to step around him. "I'm here to speak to my daughter." "Your daughter?" Hank's voice was dangerously quiet. "The one you cast out pregnant and alone to die." "That daughter," George's face reddened. "What happens in my family is none of your concern, Lawson. It became my concern when I found her collapsed in the wilderness because of your cruelty," Hank replied. "Clara and Emma are under my protection now." "You're not welcome here unless you've come to apologize and make amends," George sputtered, clearly unused to being challenged. "How dare you, Clara, get in the wagon. Your mother is ill with worry, and it's time you stopped this nonsense and came home where you belong." Clara stared at her father in disbelief. "Home? You threw me out. You said I was dead to you." "That was before," George began, but Clara cut him off. "Before what?" "Before you realized what the neighbors might think, before Mother finally stood up to you." Clara held Emma closer, the baby beginning to fuss at the raised voices. "I'm not coming back, Father. This is my home now." George's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. You can't possibly think you have a future here, living off this man's charity, raising your child in sin." "There's no sin in this house," Hank said firmly. "Only decency and hard work. Clara earns her keep and then some. She's respected here," George sneered. "Respected? Is that what you call it? The whole town knows, the whole town can go to hell," Hank interrupted, his patience clearly at an end. "And so can you if you can't speak to your daughter with respect. Now get back in your wagon and leave my property before I forget my manners entirely." For a moment, Clara thought her father might actually strike Hank, but something in the rancher's steady gaze must have given him pause. Instead, George turned to Clara one last time. "This is your final chance, Clara. Come home now or don't come at all." Clara felt a strange calm settle over her. "Goodbye, Father. Give my love to Mother." George's face hardened. Without another word, he climbed back into his wagon, turned it around with unnecessary force, and drove away in a cloud of dust. Clara remained on the porch, gently rocking Emma, who had begun to cry in earnest. Hank watched until the wagon disappeared from sight before turning back to Clara. "Are you all right?" he asked, climbing the porch steps. Clara nodded, though tears threatened. "I think so. I just never thought he'd." She trailed off, unable to articulate the complex emotions swirling within her. Hank moved closer, hesitating before placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "For what it's worth, I meant what I said. You've earned your place here, Clara. You and Emma both." Clara looked up at him, struck by the sincerity in his blue eyes. "Thank you, Hank, for everything." Emma's cries grew more insistent, and Clara smiled ruefully. "Someone's hungry." "I should take her inside." Hank nodded, dropping his hand. "Of course. I'll finish checking the stock and be in for supper." As Clara fed Emma in the rocking chair by her bedroom window, she reflected on the confrontation with her father. The pain of his rejection was still there, but it felt more distant now, less capable of wounding her deeply. In its place was a growing certainty that she had found where she belonged, not as a daughter trying desperately to please an unpleasable father, but as a woman and mother carving out her own place in the world. And Hank. The way he had defended her and Emma stirred feelings that both excited and frightened her. After Richard's betrayal, she had sworn never to trust a man again, but Hank Lawson was proving difficult to keep at a distance. The summer progressed, bringing with it the intense heat of a Colorado July. Work on the ranch continued from dawn until dusk, with cattle to move to higher pastures, horses to train, and endless repairs to fences and buildings damaged by the occasional violent thunderstorm. Clara found her role expanding beyond the account books. As Emma grew stronger, Clara began accompanying Hank on rides around the property, learning the business from the ground up. She had a good eye for horseflesh, Hank discovered, and an even better head for negotiation when buyers came to look at the stock. One particularly hot afternoon in late July, Clara joined Hank at the corral where he was working with a spirited 2-year-old bay gelding. Emma, now almost 2 months old, was napping in the house under Martha's watchful eye. Clara leaned against the fence, watching as Hank moved with the young horse, his movements patient and deliberate. There was something mesmerizing about the way he communicated with the animal, firm but never harsh, respectful of its spirit while establishing clear boundaries. "He's coming along nicely," Clara commented when Hank approached the fence, leading the gelding on a long rein. Hank nodded, a rare smile lighting his features. "He's smart, learns quick." He patted the horse's neck approvingly. "Another week or two and he'll be ready for a saddle." "Mr. Peterson from Denver might be interested," Clara suggested. "He was asking about trained mounts for his sons when I saw him in town last week." "Good thinking," Hank replied, clearly impressed. "Peterson pays fair and on time." As they discussed the potential sale, Clara noticed a rider approaching from the east, a familiar figure that made her heart sink. "Richard," she said quietly, nodding toward the approaching horseman. Hank's expression darkened. "Stay here," he instructed, handing the gelding's lead to one of the ranch hands before striding out to meet the unwelcome visitor. Clara ignored the directive, following a few paces behind. She had run from Richard Blackwell once before. She wouldn't do so again. Richard reined his expensive black stallion to a stop a few yards from Hank. He was dressed as if for a social call in town rather than a visit to a working ranch, his tailored jacket and polished boots a stark contrast to Hank's practical work clothes. "Lawson," Richard greeted with false cordiality. "I see your operation is still functioning." "State your business, Blackwell," Hank replied flatly. "I've got work to do." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Actually, I've come to speak with Clara, a private matter." "Anything you have to say to Miss Thompson can be said in front of me," Hank responded, his stance protective. "It's all right, Hank," Clara said, stepping forward. "What do you want, Richard?" Richard studied her, his gaze calculating. "You're looking well, Clara." "Motherhood agrees with you, it seems." Clara crossed her arms. "I didn't think you'd notice or care." "That's rather harsh," Richard replied with feigned hurt. "Especially considering my proposition." "Proposition," Clara echoed warily. Richard dismounted, brushing dust from his jacket sleeves. "My father is retiring next month. I'll be taking over full management of the bank." He paused, clearly expecting congratulations that didn't come. "The position requires certain social obligations." A bachelor bank manager raises eyebrows. Clara stared at him, comprehension slowly dawning. "Are you suggesting?" "Marriage," Richard confirmed smoothly. "It would solve both our problems. You'd have respectability again, a comfortable home in town. The child would have my name." "Emma already has a name," Clara said coldly, "and I don't have a problem that needs solving." Richard laughed, the sound grating. "Come now, Clara, look at your situation realistically. Living on a ranch, dependent on a bachelor's charity, raising a child out of wedlock. What kind of future is that? A damn sight better than being tied to you," Hank interjected, his voice low with anger. Richard's expression hardened. "This doesn't concern you, Lawson." "Yes, it does," Clara said firmly. "Hank is my friend and employer, and he's right. I would rather live honestly as an unmarried mother than dishonestly as your wife. Think of the child, Richard urged, changing tactics. What opportunities will she have with the stigma of illegitimacy? She'll have love, Clara replied, and dignity, and the example of a mother who refused to sell herself for appearance's sake. Richard's facade of civility cracked. You're a fool, Clara. This is your last chance at respectability. No, Clara countered, a strange calm settling over her. This is your last chance to do the right thing because it's right, not because it serves your ambition, and you're failing it just as I always knew you would. For a moment, Richard seemed genuinely taken aback by her directness, then his expression contorted with anger. You'll regret this, he spat. Both of you, he glared at Hank. Enjoy my leavings, Lawson, they weren't worth keeping anyway. Before either could respond, Richard mounted his horse and galloped away, his departure as dramatic as his arrival. Clara let out a shaky breath, her momentary bravado fading. I'm sorry you had to witness that. Hank turned to her, his expression a mix of fury and admiration. Don't apologize. That was. He shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. You're something else, Clara Thompson. Is that good or bad? She asked, attempting a smile. Good, Hank said firmly. Definitely good. He hesitated, then added softly, what you said about living honestly, I admire that. More than I can say. Clara felt warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Thank you for supporting me, again. Hank nodded, suddenly awkward. We should get back to work. That fence in the north pasture won't fix itself. As he turned toward the barn, Clara called after him. Hank, he looked back, eyebrows raised in question. I'm not dependent on charity, she said firmly. I want you to know that. I earn my keep here. A smile tugged at the corner of Hank's mouth. I know that better than anyone, Clara. This ranch runs twice as efficiently since you arrived. If anything, I'm in your debt. With that, he continued toward the barn, leaving Clara with a newfound sense of pride and purpose, and the unsettling realization that her feelings for Hank Lawson had grown far beyond gratitude or friendship. August brought a brief respite from the heat, with cooler evenings that allowed for more comfortable outdoor gatherings. To celebrate the successful sale of several trained horses, Hank organized a small Saturday evening barbecue for the ranch hands, Martha, and a few neighboring ranchers who had helped during the spring roundup. Clara spent the day preparing food with Martha, Emma contentedly watching from her basket in the kitchen. By sunset, the yard had been transformed with lanterns hanging from tree branches, a long table set with simple but attractive place settings, and the mouth-watering aroma of beef roasting over an open pit. You've outdone yourself, Hank commented, appearing in the kitchen doorway as Clara put the finishing touches on an apple pie. He was freshly shaved and dressed in clean clothes, his dark hair still damp from washing. Clara smiled, pleased by the compliment. It's been a good summer. We should celebrate. It has at that, Hank agreed, watching as she wiped flour from her hands. You look nice, he added somewhat awkwardly. Clara glanced down at her dress, a new one she had sewn herself from fabric purchased in town, its blue calico pattern simple but becoming. Thank you. I thought the occasion warranted something other than work clothes. Miss Clara always looks beautiful, Martha declared, entering the kitchen with Emma in her arms. The baby, dressed in a white gown Clara had fashioned from one of Martha's old petticoats, gurgled happily at the sight of her mother. Clara felt her cheeks warm at Martha's blunt assessment and Hank's continued gaze. Well, I should check on the tables, she said, taking Emma from Martha. Our guests will be arriving soon. The evening proved a delightful success. The neighboring ranchers and their wives welcomed Clara warmly, cooing over Emma and complimenting the food. The ranch hands, usually reserved around womenfolk as they put it, relaxed enough to share stories and even demonstrate a few dance steps when one produced a harmonica after dinner. Clara, seated at the long table with Emma sleeping against her shoulder, felt a contentment she had never known before. This improvised family Hank, Martha, the ranch hands had accepted her and Emma without reservation, offering friendship and community when she needed it most. Penny for your thoughts, Hank said, taking the empty chair beside her. Clara smiled. I was just thinking how fortunate Emma and I are to have landed here among such good people. Hank's expression softened. The fortune goes both ways, Clara. You've brought something to this place that was missing before. Oh, what's that? Hank seemed to consider his words carefully. Life, real life. Before you came, we all just worked, ate, slept, and did it again the next day. There was no joy to it. The simple honesty of his observation touched Clara deeply. Before she could respond, one of the neighboring ranchers approached their table. Hank, Clara, Samuel Wilson greeted them. Fine gathering. Reminds me of the old days when your father was alive, Hank. High praise, Hank replied, standing to shake Samuel's hand. Pa did love a good barbecue. Samuel nodded, his gaze moving between Hank and Clara with obvious approval. It's good to see Lawson Ranch thriving again. Your father would be proud. He glanced at Clara and Emma. Of everything. After Samuel moved on to chat with other guests, Hank remained standing, an unreadable expression on his face. Did I say something wrong? Clara asked, concerned by his sudden change in mood. Hank shook his head. No, it's just, Samuel seems to think. He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. That we're a family, Clara finished for him, understanding dawning. You, me, and Emma. Hank nodded, his eyes meeting hers cautiously. Does that bother you, that people might assume? No, Clara replied honestly. Does it bother you? The question hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Before Hank could answer, Martha called for his help with moving tables to create space for more dancing, breaking the moment. As the evening progressed, Clara found herself watching Hank the way he laughed with his neighbors, his gentle teasing of the youngest ranch hand, his careful attention to everyone's comfort. When had this reserved, sometimes gruff man become so dear to her? And what would happen when he inevitably found a woman worthy of becoming the real mistress of Lawson Ranch? The thought sent an unexpected pang through Clara's heart. Despite all logic and her own protective instincts, she had fallen in love with Hank Lawson. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the ranch was quiet, Clara sat in the rocking chair in her room, unable to sleep. Emma had been fed and changed but remained wakeful, her tiny hands grasping at the air as Clara sang softly to her. A knock at the door surprised her. Come in, she called quietly. The door opened to reveal Hank, still dressed from the evening, his expression serious. I thought I heard singing, he said. Is everything all right? Clara nodded. Emma's just having trouble settling tonight. Too much excitement, I think. Hank entered the room, closing the door partway behind him. May I? He asked, gesturing toward Emma. Surprised by the request, Clara carefully transferred the baby to Hank's waiting arms. Despite his large hands and broad frame, Hank held Emma with remarkable gentleness, cradling her against his chest with practiced ease. Hello, little miss, he murmured, lightly touching Emma's cheek with one finger. Giving your mama a hard time tonight, are you? To Clara's amazement, Emma seemed to calm immediately, her fussing quieting as she gazed up at Hank with wide eyes. You have a gift, Clara observed. She usually doesn't settle so easily for anyone but me. Hank smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his features. We understand each other, don't we, Emma? He looked up at Clara, his expression turning serious again. I never answered your question earlier. Clara tensed slightly. Which one? About whether it bothered me that people might think we're a family, Hank replied, his voice low and steady. It doesn't bother me, not at all, in fact. He paused, seemed to gather his courage. In fact, I've been thinking about that very thing a lot lately. Clara's heart began to race. You have, Hank nodded, his gaze dropping to Emma, who had finally drifted to sleep in his arms. I know this isn't conventional, and I know you've had reason to distrust men's intentions, but I need to say this, Clara. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. I care for you and for Emma, more than I thought possible. Clara felt tears gathering. Hank, please, let me finish, he said gently. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just wanted you to know that if someday, when you're ready, if you could see me as more than your employer or friend, well, I'd count myself the luckiest man in Colorado. A tear slipped down Clara's cheek. I already do, she whispered. Hank stared at her as if afraid he'd misheard. You do? Clara nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat, Carefully, so as not to disturb the now sleeping Emma, Hank stepped closer to Clara. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely audible. In answer, Clara rose from the rocking chair and closed the distance between them. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed her lips gently to his in a kiss that, though brief and chaste, held the promise of a future she had thought forever lost to her. When they parted, Hank's eyes were suspiciously bright. "I should put Emma down," he murmured, moving to place the sleeping baby in her cradle with surprising skill. Then he returned to Clara, taking her hands in his. "I don't want to rush you," he said earnestly. "After everything you've been through, you deserve time, and I'm not. I'm not good with words like this, but I want you to know that my intentions are honorable. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I want to make this real. You, me, Emma, a family, properly." Clara squeezed his hands. "I'd like that, not right away perhaps, but yes, I'd like that very much." Hank's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Then we have something to look forward to." He released her hands reluctantly. "I should let you rest, it's been a long day." At the door, he paused, looking back at Clara with an expression of wonder. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Hank," she replied, her heart fuller than she had ever thought possible. As summer gave way to fall, Clara and Hank's relationship blossomed cautiously. They kept their growing feelings relatively private, mindful of propriety and the gossiping tongues in Aurora. But within the safe confines of the ranch, small changes marked the evolution of their bond, lingering touches as they passed each other in the hallway, private conversations on the porch after Emma was asleep, and the occasional stolen kiss when Martha was occupied elsewhere. Emma thrived under the combined attention of her mother, Hank, and Martha. At 3 months old, she was a happy, healthy baby with Clara's light brown hair and eyes that were gradually changing from newborn blue to a hazel that matched neither Clara's brown nor Richard's gray, a fact that pleased Clara immensely. September brought the harvest and preparations for winter. The ranch buzzed with activity as hay was cut and stored, the last of the season's vegetables preserved, and cattle brought down from summer pastures. Clara found herself fully integrated into the operations, her role expanding far beyond the account books as she helped with canning, coordinated supply runs to town, and even assisted with the fall roundup, riding alongside Hank and the hands. One crisp October morning, Clara was in the kitchen kneading bread dough while Emma napped in her basket nearby. Martha had gone to town for supplies, and Hank and the hands were working the north pasture, repairing fences before the first snow. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew Clara to the window. A rider was approaching at a gallop, one of the hands, riding much too fast. Something was wrong. Wiping flour from her hands, Clara hurried to the door just as the young cowboy, Jeremiah, pulled his lathered horse to a stop in the yard. "Miss Clara," he called, dismounting so quickly he nearly fell. "It's the boss, he's hurt bad." Clara's heart seemed to stop. "What happened?" "Bull gored him," Jeremiah panted. "We were moving the herd and one of them young bulls broke away, went crazy." Boss pushed Tom out of the way and took the horn himself. "Where is he?" Clara demanded, already reaching for her shawl. "Others are bringing him in the wagon. Doc's been sent for," but Jeremiah hesitated. "But what?" Clara pressed, fear gripping her. "It's bad, Miss Clara, real bad." He was conscious at first, then passed out. "There's a lot of blood." Clara's mind raced. "Go to the barn and bring clean blankets from the storage chest," she instructed, forcing calm into her voice. "Then heat water on the stove as much as you can. I'll prepare the bedroom." As Jeremiah hurried to obey, Clara quickly moved Emma's basket to her own room, then went to Hank's bedroom. She stripped the bed and remade it with clean sheets, laid out bandages Martha had prepared for emergencies, and placed a basin and towels on the bedside table. By the time she heard the wagon approaching, Clara had transformed Hank's bedroom into a makeshift infirmary. She rushed outside, her heart in her throat as she saw the grim-faced ranch hands carefully lifting Hank's limp form from the wagon bed. "Bring him inside," she directed, leading the way to the bedroom. The sight of Hank, pale and unconscious, his shirt torn and soaked with blood, nearly undid her composure. A jagged wound in his left side oozed dark blood, and his breathing was shallow and labored. "Lay him on the bed," Clara instructed, her voice steadier than she felt. Gently now. As the hands placed Hank on the clean sheets, Tom, the oldest of the crew, turned to Clara. The doctor's coming, but it might be a while. Town's a fair piece away. Clara nodded, already rolling up her sleeves. We need to stop the bleeding. Jeremiah, is that water hot? Coming to a boil now, Miss Clara, the young cowboy called from the kitchen. Good, bring it here when it's ready. She turned to Tom. I need to clean the wound and see how deep it is. Can you cut away his shirt? Tom nodded, pulling out a pocket knife. As he carefully cut the blood-soaked fabric away from Hank's torso, Clara steeled herself for what she might see. The wound was indeed serious, a deep puncture in Hank's left side, just below the ribs. Clara had seen enough injuries growing up in a frontier town to know that internal damage was a real possibility. It missed his heart, Tom observed, voicing what they were all thinking. That's something. Clara nodded grimly. Let's pray it missed everything else important too. She took a deep breath. I need to clean this wound thoroughly. It will hurt him, even unconscious. I need you to hold him still. For the next hour, Clara worked tirelessly, cleaning the wound with hot water and the precious bottle of carbolic acid Martha kept for emergencies. Hank moaned and thrashed despite his unconscious state, requiring Tom and another hand to hold him steady. When the wound was finally clean, Clara packed it with clean cloths and bandaged it as best she could. Now we wait, she said, washing blood from her hands in a basin of water that had turned pink. And pray. The hands filed out reluctantly, returning to their duties with promises to check in regularly. Clara pulled a chair close to Hank's bedside and took his hand in hers, noting with alarm how cool his skin felt. Don't you dare leave us, she whispered fiercely. Don't you dare leave me and Emma now. The hours passed with excruciating slowness. Clara checked on Emma, fed her, and returned to Hank's side, all the while watching for signs of fever or worsening condition. By late afternoon, with still no sign of the doctor, Clara changed the bandages again, relieved to see that the bleeding had slowed but concerned by Hank's continued unconsciousness. As dusk fell, Martha returned from town, alerted by the doctor who had passed her on the road. The older woman took one look at the situation and took charge, sending Clara to rest while she monitored Hank. You're exhausted, child, Martha said firmly. You'll be no good to him or Emma if you collapse. I'll wake you if there's any change. Reluctantly, Clara retreated to her room, where she fell into an exhausted sleep with Emma cradled beside her. She awoke with a start some hours later, disoriented in the darkness until she remembered Hank. Placing Emma carefully in her cradle, Clara hurried to Hank's room, finding Martha dozing in the chair by his bed. Any change? Clara whispered, not wanting to startle the older woman. Martha blinked awake. The doctor came and went, said you did everything right. The wound is deep but clean, and he thinks it missed the vital organs, she sighed. But he's lost a lot of blood. The next day or two will tell the tale. Clara nodded, taking the chair as Martha rose stiffly. I'll sit with him now. You get some proper rest. Alone with Hank, Clara studied his face in the soft lamplight. Even unconscious, lines of pain etched his features. She took his hand, alarmed to feel heat where before there had been concerning coolness. Fever's starting, she murmured, placing a hand on his forehead. The skin there was definitely warm. Through the long night, Clara battled Hank's rising fever with cool compresses and small sips of water when he seemed able to swallow. She talked to him continuously, telling him about Emma's latest accomplishments, plans for the ranch, and finally, when dawn approached and her defenses were at their lowest, the depth of her feelings for him. I love you, Hank Lawson, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I love you and I need you to fight for me, for Emma, for the family we're meant to be. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, Hank stirred, his eyelids fluttering. Clara held her breath, watching intently as he struggled toward consciousness. Clara. His voice was barely audible, rough with pain and thirst. I'm here, she said, squeezing his hand. I'm right here. Hank's blue eyes opened, focusing with effort on her face. The bull. You're going to be all right, Clara assured him, bringing a cup of water to his lips. You were injured, but the doctor says you'll recover. Hank took a small sip, then fell back against the pillows, exhausted by even that small effort. You've been here all night. It wasn't a question, but Clara nodded anyway. Of course I have. A ghost of a smile touched Hank's lips. Heard you, he murmured, his eyes drifting closed again. Heard what you said. Clara froze, suddenly aware of all she had confessed during the night, thinking he couldn't hear. Hank, love you too, he whispered, already slipping back into sleep. Always have. Clara sat stunned, tears of relief and joy mingling on her cheeks. He had heard her, and he loved her too. Hank's recovery was slow but steady. The fever broke after 2 days, and by the end of the week, he was able to sit up in bed for short periods. The doctor, on his return visit, pronounced him tough as old boot leather and predicted a full recovery, though it would be several weeks before Hank could resume his normal activities. During his convalescence, Hank's bedroom became the center of ranch operations. Clara brought the account books and correspondence there, conducting business under his direction from a chair beside his bed. Emma's cradle was moved in as well, giving Hank endless delight in watching the baby's daily changes. She smiled at me, he announced one morning in late October, his voice filled with wonder. A real smile, not just gas, Clara laughed, looking up from the ledger she was updating. Are you sure? The doctor said it's too early for real smiles. The doctor doesn't know our Emma, Hank replied with certainty. She's advanced, our Emma. The casual phrase warmed Clara's heart. Since Hank's confession during his fever, neither had directly addressed the feelings they had declared, both seemingly content to let their relationship evolve naturally as he recovered. By early November, Hank was able to move around the house with the aid of a cane, though the ranch hands still handled most of the outdoor work under Tom's capable direction. The first snow had fallen, blanketing the ranch in white and turning thoughts toward the coming holidays. One evening, as they sat before the fire in the parlor, Emma asleep in Hank's lap, Clara brought up the subject they had been avoiding. When you were injured, she began carefully, you said something about loving me. Hank looked up from contemplating Emma's sleeping face. I meant it, he said simply. Every word, Clara nodded, gathering her courage. So did I, but I've been thinking, what happens now? What do we want to happen? Hank shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing wound. What do you want, Clara? After everything you've been through, I'll understand if you need more time. Clara considered the question seriously. I want a real family for Emma and for myself. She met his gaze directly. I want you, Hank, but I also want to be sure that you want me for me, not out of obligation or pity. Hank's expression grew fierce. There's never been pity, Clara. Admiration, respect, and yes, love, but never pity. He shifted Emma to one arm and reached for Clara's hand with the other. I loved you before I even realized it. Probably from the moment I found you out on the plains, though I was too stubborn to admit it even to myself. Clara squeezed his hand. And you're sure? About taking on another man's child? Emma is yours, Hank said firmly. That's all that matters to me. And if you'll let me, I'd consider it an honor to be her father in every way that counts. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. Then yes, yes to whatever you're asking. A slow smile spread across Hank's face. I'm asking you to marry me, Clara Thompson. As soon as I'm well enough to stand in front of a preacher without falling over. Clara laughed through her tears. In that case, definitely yes. They were married on Christmas Eve in the parlor of Lawson Ranch, decorated for the occasion with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. The ceremony was small but joyful, with Martha, the ranch hands, and a few neighboring families as witnesses. Emma, now nearly 5 months old, watched the proceedings from Martha's arms, dressed in a christening gown that had once belonged to Hank's mother. Clara wore a simple dress of deep blue wool, her hair arranged with sprigs of holly. Hank, still moving carefully but free from the cane for the occasion, looked handsome in his best suit, his dark hair freshly trimmed and his blue eyes never leaving Clara's face as they exchanged their vows. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the preacher declared. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Lawson. As Hank's lips met Clara's in a tender kiss, cheers erupted from their small audience. When they parted, both smiling widely, Martha brought Emma forward. And now, the preacher continued, Mr. Lawson has asked that we include a special addition to today's ceremony. Surprised, Clara looked questioningly at Hank. If you're agreeable, Hank said softly, taking Emma from Martha. "I'd like to make our family official in every way." Understanding dawned on Clara. "You want to adopt Emma?" Hank nodded. "I've already filed the papers with the county. All that's needed is the formality of acknowledging it before witnesses." Fresh tears filled Clara's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course." The preacher smiled approvingly. "Then let it be known that from this day forward, Emma Hope Thompson shall be known as Emma Hope Lawson, daughter of Henry and Clara Lawson, with all the rights and privileges thereof." As Hank placed Emma in Clara's arms, then wrapped his own arms around them both, Clara felt a sense of completion she had never thought possible. From the depths of despair, cast out, pregnant, and alone, she had found not just survival but joy, purpose, and love. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Lawson," Hank murmured against her hair. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawson," Clara replied, her heart too full for more words. Later, after the guests had departed and Emma was tucked into her cradle, Clara and Hank stood on the porch, watching snowflakes drift down from a star-filled sky. The ranch was peaceful, blanketed in white, smoke curling from the chimney of the home that was now truly theirs together. "Happy?" Hank asked, his arm warm around Clara's waist. Clara leaned into his embrace, thinking of the journey that had brought her to this moment. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "You saved my life, Hank Lawson." Hank turned her gently to face him, his expression serious in the soft light spilling from the windows. "No, Clara, you saved mine. I was just existing before you came. You and Emma gave me a reason to truly live." As their lips met in another kiss, Clara knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, a family forged not by convention or obligation, but by choice and love. 5 years later, Clara Lawson stood on the porch of Lawson Ranch, watching as Hank helped 5-year-old Emma and their 3-year-old son, James, feed carrots to a gentle old mare. The sound of her children's laughter carried across the yard, mingling with the other familiar sounds of the thriving ranch. Much had changed in those 5 years. The ranch had expanded, with new pastures, a larger barn, and several additional hands to manage the growing operation. The house, too, had been enlarged, with a new wing added to accommodate their growing family. Clara's hand rested lightly on her rounded belly, where their third child, another boy, she suspected, was making his presence known with enthusiastic kicks. Due in the spring, this baby would complete their family, or so they planned. "Mama, look," Emma called, her light brown braids bouncing as she waved excitedly. "Daisy took the carrot right from my hand." "Well done, sweetheart," Clara called back, smiling at her daughter's delight. Emma had grown into a confident, curious child with Clara's thoughtfulness and Hank's quiet determination. Though she knew that Richard Blackwell was her biological father, Emma considered Hank her true father in every way that mattered. The adoption papers, framed in Hank's study, were merely a formality to the deep bond between father and daughter. Richard himself had left Aurora 2 years earlier, following a banking scandal that had ruined his family's reputation. Clara had felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that he was no longer a shadow in their lives. Her parents, too, had faded into the background. After her father's death the previous year, Clara's mother had written, asking for reconciliation. The meeting had been awkward but healing, and now Emma and James had a grandmother who visited occasionally, bearing gifts and making tentative efforts to be part of their lives. As Clara watched her family in the yard, Martha emerged from the house, drying her hands on her apron. "Supper's nearly ready," the older woman announced. "Those children need to wash up before they come to my table." Clara smiled affectionately at Martha, whose role had expanded from housekeeper to beloved grandmother figure for the children. "I'll call them in." But before she could, Hank looked up, catching her eye across the yard. With a word to the children, he headed toward the porch, his stride strong and confident, all traces of his old injury gone except for a slight stiffness in cold weather. "Everything all right?" he asked, climbing the steps to join her. "You've been standing out here a while," Clara nodded, leaning into him as his arm circled her waist. "Just thinking about how far we've come, how much has changed." Hank's hand covered hers where it rested on her belly, having regrets. he asked, though his tone held no real concern. Clara turned to face him, taking in the familiar features that had only grown dearer with time, the crinkles at the corners of his blue eyes, the touches of silver at his temples, the smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "Not a single one," she assured him, rising on tiptoe to press a kiss to his lips. "You gave me a reason to live when I had none, Hank Lawson, and every day since has been a gift." Hank's smile deepened, lighting his entire face. "The gift has been mine, Clara. You and our children, you're everything I never knew I needed." As Emma and James raced toward the porch, faces flushed with cold and excitement, Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Life had not been easy or straightforward, but standing here, surrounded by the family they had built together, she wouldn't change a moment of the journey that had brought her home.